In today's video, we have a lot of news and rumors from around the NHL to discuss, including more news from the NHL waiver wire, lots of roster moves. We're finding in St. Louis, and in the rumor mill, we're taking the Calgary Flames. Obviously, they have lots of players that are potentially available, including goaltender Jacob Markstrom. We're also taking a look on a potential deal involving Trevor Zegras, with Jamie Drysdale being traded for Cutter Gauthier. Could Zegras be next? It's a hot topic around the NHL. We'll discuss that, plus how Drysdale affects the Flyers' moves on the blue line, coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot of news and rumors to take a look at here today. Of course, it's been a busy 48 hours of news. Lots of big stories this week, including the William Nylander signing. We got a big trade involving Philadelphia and Anaheim, and some more news here that we want to talk about today. First up, we got news from the NHL waiver wire. Some more activity here today. The Calgary Flames had forward Kevin Rooney on waivers yesterday. He did, in fact, clear and has been assigned to the minor leagues. And then the Montreal Canadiens today placed young defenseman Gustav Lindstrom on waivers as well. So we'll find out if he's picked up or clears tomorrow, 2 o'clock Eastern time, and whether or not he'll be reassigned or off to another NHL club. Some other quick roster moves from around the NHL as well, and some injury updates. Washington today activated goaltender Charlie Lindgren, and they've reassigned Hunter Shepard back to the minors. The Calgary Flames today recalled defenseman Yan Kuznetsov, and it's also been at least expected that tonight against the Ottawa Senators in their game, that they're expected to make Dylan Dubé a healthy scratch again. So that's a couple times that's happened to Dubé. Have to wonder what's if he can be reset and kind of get things going, or maybe he'll join the long list of players in Calgary, maybe needing a fresh start. We'll have to see on that. And of course, their counterparts tonight, the Ottawa Senators, also made some roster moves today, activating Matthew Joseph from long-term injured reserve. So he's back tonight. And Rourke Chartier, who was on injured reserve, gets bumped to long-term injured reserve. And the Ottawa Senators are actually at exactly $0 available for cap space. Like, they're at a perfect cap capture right now, which does happen on occasion, but not real common. So I guess good mathematics there by the Sens management. The Devils today recalled Shane Bowers, and they did give us an update as well on Jack Hughes. We know he left the game a few nights ago with an apparent arm or wrist injury. Right now they're declaring him as week to week. Head coach Lindy Ruff said it's weeks, not months. So that doesn't really give us too clear, kind of a timeline. Weeks and not months. I mean, for months to be plural, that's, 2 months. That's still 8 weeks. So could it be 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks? It could be, but it very well could be less. And the last couple of times that he's had an injury where it's been labeled like this, he's only missed 5 or 6 games. So hard to say exactly what Jack Hughes is dealing with in the exact time frame here, but certainly going to miss time. I think it's probably fair to say at least a couple of weeks. And right now the Devils are certainly battling the injury bug pretty hard, and we'll see how much this impacts their playoff push. And the Rangers today, after recalling and giving him a game, they've taken youngster Brendan Othman and returned him to the American Hockey League. The St. Louis Blues today announced a contract extension for 29-year-old UK native Nathan Walker. He gets a 2-year deal at $775,000. This year, he's mostly been an AHL player for them in the minors, but he's been a very productive one at that. And clearly, they see him having some value and worthy sticking around the organization, maybe being a player for them on a cheaper contract here over the next couple of years. Now, as I mentioned, we have a pretty ramped up NHL rumor mill, all kinds of stuff flying around about potential deals. We're now with that 60-day mark to the NHL trade deadline. So clearly things are starting to pick up. Teams are becoming a little bit more clear of their buyers, sellers, etc. There's still some in the middle that are not quite sure which way they're going, but things are certainly picking up on that front. Dave Pagnotta provides pretty well all of our information here today. He talked about the Calgary Flames in a recent article. Of course, we know that they have some tough decisions to make on their pending UFAs. Elias Lindholm, Noah Hannafin, Chris Tanev have dominated the rumor mill and the trade bait boards really since the beginning of the season. Lots of talk lately that the Flames are making another last-ditch effort to try to sign Hannafin, and there is at least a little bit of optimism that they might be able to get it done. No guarantees, of course, but there's a chance that they're trying, and there's hope. Lindholm and Tanev, on the other hand, seem destined to be traded, but you just never know, I guess. Lindholm, I think, is the most likely to go. And I think between Hanifin and Tanev, if I had to wager a bet on who was more likely to stay, I probably would pick Hanifin. I think the Flames might push a little harder for that. Clearly, he's younger, which plays a big factor here as well. If they're going to do a long-term deal, they certainly don't want to get into any older of a player than they need to. I mean, not that Tanev isn't valuable. He's very valuable, very different kind of player. So hard to say, but there's a chance that at least 2 out of 3, if not maybe even 3 out of 3, likely to get dealt before the deadline. They're going to be a very active team. They're certainly a team that doesn't really appear ready to make a playoff push. They're kind of in that, win a couple, lose a couple kind of mode, hovering around the 500 mark. They just don't seem destined for playoffs this year. That's at least my take on them. But another player that's come up here in Pagnotta's column is Jacob Markstrom. According to Pagnota, there's certainly not anything imminent right now. It's not like it's, getting close. But there's certainly a possibility we could see Markstrom on the move. Now, he's going to have some say in this if he does go, but apparently the Flames are open to it. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. The right trade has to come, but they're open to it, and some teams, he said at least 2 teams, have been poking around, kind of trying to gauge what it might take for the Flames to pull the trigger. Now, we know they've got, besides Markstrom, Dan Vladar and Dustin Wolf in the waiting. Wolf appears to be the next number 1 goalie for the team. We'll have to see if that comes to be like everybody expects. But certainly, Markstrom's had, I don't know how to describe his tenure in Calgary, kind of up and down, not quite as strong, but he's had his moments when he's been really good, but he's had his moments where he's not so good too. So I don't know. I mean, obviously he's well into his 30s now, a couple of years left on his contract, $6 million. It's really difficult to say what the future holds for Markstrom, but there's teams out there looking for goaltending help. There's some that are looking for a distinct number 1 that would like to acquire somebody and have that position solidified for a few years, and he theoretically could do that. So no guarantee he moves. He will have some say in it, but teams are poking around. Flames appear to be at least willing to listen and open to it, and if they can get themselves a good haul to help in other areas of the team, there's a chance we could see Markstrom on the move. Now, the other thing he talks about here today as well, a couple of items in relation to the trade that we saw with the Ducks and Flyers and Gauthier and Drysdale. Obviously, and he's not the only one that's mentioned this. I've seen Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick talk about it as well on the Merrick Show and the podcast about the Flyers. They have to think now with Jamie Drysdale being acquired that there's a good chance Sean Walker in Philadelphia does indeed end up getting moved. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about him this year. He's been a nice find for the Flyers, a nice pickup in the trade that they got with the LA Kings. He's performed well above expectations, and he's gotten some interest. And there's no doubt teams were inquiring with Philly, but there was no guarantee they wanted to move him. And there was earlier in the campaign, there was a word that they were so impressed with him that maybe they'll want to re-sign him. But now that they got Drysdale, that creates a little bit of not really a big log jam on the blue line, but it kind of creates a less likelihood that they're going to want to keep him as well. So the feeling around now is that Walker is much more likely to get it traded now that Drysdale's on the scene in Philly. So I know they're going to be looking for a pretty good price tag. The Flyers are a team, obviously, that's right now in the playoff mix. So no guarantee that they make it. It's not a slam dunk. They don't have a big lead or anything, but they're certainly involved and they're in the race. And, things could change over the next 2 months. By the time we get to the deadline, maybe they're out of it, or maybe they're pretty secure. Either way, I think they're not a team right now that I would say that is going to be foolish and kind of, not have good asset management. I suspect that they are well aware that they probably didn't expect to be in the playoffs this year, and that if they're ahead of schedule on turning things around, they're not going to be silly. If they think that Walker's future is not in Philly, they're going to move him regardless to make sure they get a good return. So we'll see, but Drysdale's arrival will definitely have an impact there. And the other big part here as well is in Anaheim. I've seen it mentioned. Jeff Merrick brought it up today. Dave Pagnota wrote about it in his column. I even mentioned it yesterday before any of them in that video yesterday, saying with Jamie Drysdale being traded, you have to wonder, is Trevor Zegras available? And it seems like the Ducks are at least open to it. There was belief in the summertime before they got the contract extension ironed out that they were very much at least willing to listen on Zegras. Doesn't mean for sure that they wanted to move him. I think the preference was to keep him and sign him. but I don't think they were happy with where negotiations were going, and they were at least willing to look at things. Certainly Zegras is a really highly skilled player, one of the more entertaining players to watch around the league. I think there's probably been a little bit of a, some might question his style of play, similar to the older school way of thinking, because he certainly loves his fancy moves, his lacrosse goals. And you know what? And for the younger generation, they absolutely love that stuff. And that's why he is such a popular, highly entertaining player for a lot of people. But I know there's some, including his coach, that I think might be a little frustrated sometimes with the way he plays. And I wonder the long-term fit. I mean, he's naturally a center, but can be a winger. With the arrival of Cutter Gauthier, and they already have Mason McTavish, Leo Carlson, does he have a future there now? Or are they going to consider moving Zegras for another piece? I mean, him and Drysdale were certainly not old players at all, but they are a few years older than the latest crop coming through. We saw Chicago move Kirby Dach. Could it be a same sort of scenario? I mean, the Ducks are not in the process of tearing it down. They've already in the process of building it back up. But, I don't know. There's just a belief that Zegras could be available. That we can say for certain. And Dave Pegg noted today in his column, not having sources, he said a gut feeling. And when writers with sources that are well connected like that sometimes use the word gut feeling, they generally do know something, and they just don't feel comfortable enough putting it out there as sources say type of deal. They tend to use that lingo just to be on the safer side of things. And if it turns out to be wrong, they can just be like, yeah, I was wrong. It's just that was just a gut feeling type of thing. But he referenced the Montreal Canadiens being a landing spot for Zegras. Of course, great relationship with Cole Caulfield, good friends, played together a lot at the national team program in the United States. They could be a great duo. Not to say that Caulfield obviously has great chemistry with Suzuki, but the Habs are not the deepest down the middle. They could certainly use a player like him to come in and help make that rebuild go even better, and he really strengthen that forward group. Like I said before, they have a lot. They're pretty strong on the blue line. They have some good young forwards, but they could use a few more. I'm not sure what the cost would be. I don't think it's going to be cheap. But if Zegras is available, he just has a gut feeling that Montreal would be involved there and that he could end up there. But it's early. It's premature. I don't necessarily see if Zegras is moved. I'm not convinced it's going to be before the deadline. It could be something that happens in the summer. Maybe it's a draft day deal. It's hard to say. I don't think Pat Verbeek is out there actively shopping Trevor Zegras. I just think since the summer, fair to say they were open to it at the very least, depending on the deal. And now with the Drysdale trade that's happened, you have to think that it's we've seen what he'll do. I think he'd pull the trigger there if the right deal comes along. So we'll see. Hard to say what happens, but I'm not sure that Trevor Zegras has a long future with the Ducks. Let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.